Ah. Well, greetings, apocalyptic tears. It's your old pal King Waspinator, aka for our purposes of live streaming, I guess, Immortan Josh. I haven't been able to stream on the internet here in a long ass time. When I moved in here, our internet was shit, but recently Spectrum came out and replaced some cables that apparently some squirrels had chewed through, so I'm going to try to stream. This mainly to see how long it lasts. Obviously, there's a lot of weird shit going on in the world right now. For starters, I felt it'd be cute to read about MAGA Island, as featured in Riff's World Book 6, South America. And then maybe move on to Twitter, unless anyone who is actually watching manages to have any questions or anything they'd like to talk about or hear about, or get my take on. So anyway, let's see. MAGA Island. MAGA Island is a center of learning and magic knowledge. Its founders are a mixture of human Amazon Indians of different jungle tribes and the mysterious newcomers known as the Jungle Elves, masters of biomancy. At first sight, the island would appear to be a primitive, nearly uninhabited place. Anyone flying over the island would only see a thick, impenetrable canopy, broken by an occasional clearing and little else. Visitors will discover that all the trees on the island are MDC structures and almost impossible to cut down through normal means. Beneath the thick forest is an amazing civilization that never cuts or damages trees, plants, and harvests crops while living in harmony with nature. The large island is home of an advanced civilization that is almost totally based on magic. The housing, feeding, and security of MAGA Island's inhabitants is provided by the Biomancers, a special group of mages who have learned to gently manipulate nature to achieve their ends. Only in the otherworldly dimension of Wormwood and a few areas of England can one find such a close relationship between the people and their environment. Already, very ironic now, isn't it? The Jungle Elves keep no written records. Their history is transmitted orally and magically and kept in their wondrous memory trees. They arrived on Earth carrying the seeds of these trees, seeds that contained all their previous history. According to the tales told by the memory trees, the Jungle Elves were denizens of a forest-covered planet, identified simply as the Green. On this planet, the elves and diverse fairy races coexisted peacefully. For tens of thousands of years, the Jungle Elves lived in amazing balance with nature. The Megaverse, however, is a harsh and unforgiving place. One day, dimensional rifts ripped open the skies of the green world and an invading army poured through the cracks in reality. The memory trees showed images of tall humanoids in power armor, huge monsters, and dozens of alien beings, most trying to claim yet another world for themselves. Although war and violence had been all but unknown among the people of the green world, they rallied to defend themselves. The struggle went on for years. The Jungle Elves received help from Splugorth renegades and transdimensional heroes like the Atlantean undead slayers. From then, they learned the arts of war. Biomancy, which had only been a purely beneficial form of magic, was transformed to become a powerful weapon. The Splugorth servitors were surprised by tiny elves who suddenly transformed themselves into killing machines, able to tear apart a Katani warrior in full serpent power armor. Despite their most valiant efforts, the invaders gained the upper hand and Green World fell to the aliens. The Splugorth lord who led the invasion was cruel and savage, even by his species' standards. When the Jungle Elves used the forest itself as a weapon, the Splugorth retaliated with defoliants and plasma bombardments, laying waste to the whole continent and obliterating the eons-old ecosystem. As the Jungle Elves prepared themselves for a fight to the death, they made a fateful decision to send a colony of their people to another world so that their race might survive in case the war was lost. Aided by transdimensional magic stolen from their enemies, 10,000 Jungle Elves and as many fairies, carrying seeds and saplings from thousands of plant species, were rifted to different places in the Megaverse. The largest group arrived on Rif's Earth not too long after the coming of the Rifts. To the Jungle Elves, the Amazonian river forest was as similar to their lost home as they could hope for. The elves scattered throughout the land, but the largest tribes stayed on a group of islands off the greater Amazon. These islands would act as a refuge and haven, a rallying place in case of an emergency. The Jungle Elves and their fairy allies befriended the human and DB inhabitants already living on the island and taught them the secrets of biomancy. They believed that such knowledge was a gift and that those who learned it would gain more understanding, love, and respect for nature. From these alliances, the kingdom of MAGA Island was born. Now, I'm not going to continue. That goes on for quite a few more pages before getting on to like the description of the Jungle Elf RCC. But wow, there's just kind of something funny for this time capsule from the mid 90s of MAGA Island, and like how purely opposite one would think MAGA Island would be. A land of jungle elves living in harmony with nature, of friendly refugees from another dimension. Like, yeah, funny. So anyway, hi all. Or hi none, I guess would be maybe more accurate to say. Who the hell watches my channel? I guess just for the sake of having something to talk about, I'm going to thumb through my phone here and look at Twitter. Let's see. Tim Pool. They released tons of prisoners over COVID, told regular Americans to shut down their businesses. Said rioters were just using the language of the unheard when they destroyed those businesses. Then Biden's staff bails them out. Fuck all this. Well, the Democrats, I mean, they've been making a calculation for years now about, they're trying to capitalize on the classic force of teen rebellion, basically. If you were to ever read the God Emperor of Dune books, or God Emperor of Dune from the Dune books by Frank Herbert, early on, Leto II talks a lot about the natural cycle of youthful angst leading to feelings of rebellion and a desire for revolution. But the desire for revolution doesn't really come from an actual desire for things to change. It largely stems from resentment at their own lack of power. But once they have their revolutionary cycle, they then become the people in power and are basically just recreating that which they were trying to, quote unquote, escape from, though oftentimes distorted and inferior to what came before. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting. A lot of the D&D pages here on Twitter I've been noticing. I've been virtue signaling like fuck. Like, I don't know how to tell you guys there at Wizards of the Coast. Like, you do realize that the central axis to which all people who play your game define their characters is on race and class. So maybe I guess they have a reason to want to be virtue signaling, like, hey, please don't burn our buildings down and take our shit. Christina Summers, she's liking and retweeting a lot of stuff, but I haven't actually seen her post anything in a while. Some guy called Colin J. Smothers. At this point, if you're encouraging protest after curfew, you're no longer encouraging protest. You're encouraging riots, looting, insurrection, and anarchy. Okay, I've seen, there's this thing of wanting to distinguish between riots and protesting. A riot is, by definition, something that started off as a protest. It just went off the rails at some point. Not all protests are destined to become riots, but riots start off as a bunch of people gathering in the street to protest something, and then it turns violent. Whether or not they instigate the violence or the violence is instigating on them, and then the crowd responds, that's, I guess, like another subject. But there is a blurred line there. And so, like, all this hard line stuff that people in the political end of our media spectrum are keep trying to separate the two, you can't. They bleed into each other. Rachel Olding, another retweet from Christina Summers. Hard to describe how rampant the looting was tonight in Midtown Manhattan and how lawless it was. Complete anarchy. Literally hundreds of stores up and down Broadway, 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue. Kids ruling the streets like it was a party. Yeah, go figure. There's a certain point where the protests provide cover for the riots, and then the riots provide cover for people who are just opportunistically coming out and just taking advantage of the fact that they have an ability to grab stuff for free and get away with it. Albeit, I notice every time I see videos of people robbing stores, like Sprint stores or other electronic boutique kind of things, like, aren't all those data devices able to be tracked by the companies that produce them? So if you stole a laptop or you stole an iPhone, like, how are you supposed to activate it and use it without Google or Apple or whomever has produced the thing, knowing that you are holding on to a piece of stolen tech, assuming, they have serial numbers? And I know they're able to identify individual computers. So I stealing sneakers is one thing. You can get away with that in the long term. But, like, how the hell, what are you going to do with your stolen iPhone when you got to register it? for it to even be able to work. I guess they can all just be used as Wi-Fi platforms. It's basically what I use my cell phone for. The one thing I have in common with Dave Cullen is I do like having an old-fashioned flip phone. But unfortunately, if I want to be able to like look at multiple devices at once, I got to dig this old piece of shit out. So anyway, let's see. Some more tweets. Once again, I'm just testing to see how long my internet holds up. I've not been able to stream anything in at least 2 years since I've moved into this place. Apparently, some squirrels had damaged the cable lines coming into the building, and that's why this entire time everyone's internet who lives here like constantly crashes every couple of hours, especially if there's a lot of activity. The last couple of times I did try to stream, as soon as anyone popped into the chat, it like overwhelmed my internet signal and would crash it. That's why I don't ever bother trying to have interviews or talk to other people directly. So hopefully if this works, I might be able to actually make my channel a little bit better finally. Unfortunately, the host is still a problem, but hey, what can you do? I feel sorry for the guy, so I let him get on camera. Let's see. Oh, yeah, Dave Rubin posted apparently the series finale of The Golden Girls was on earlier tonight, and he was watching it, and he thinks it's better than CNN. He actually liked my reply to it, which touched me. I've just recently got back on Twitter. I've got all of like 6 fucking followers as of this moment. So feel free if you're a Twitter person to hit up @KWaspinator, just so I have some reason to be on there. It's kind of awkward trying to get into Twitter when you don't really have anyone to interact with at all. But anyway, I'd said that I'd been watching him since way back in the TYT days. But I have to say that him saying that The Golden Girls is like better than CNN right now might be the most stereotypically gay thing that I've ever seen him post. And he liked that, so great. A lot of people re-quoting at Donald Trump quotes from his little speech earlier. I'm not even sure how I want to get into the whole Trump mess, but I guess it's inevitable if I'm scrolling through Twitter that I'll encounter it at some point or another. You know, it's hard saying that there's people in the center because there's like a million different centers and a million different reasons to be in the center. I think it's foolish to adhere to either liberalism or conservatism at the blind expense of all other things. I think the universe and that life presents us with a constant, ever-rotating and changing and evolving set of circumstances that we have to face. And there are occasions where you might want to do something conservative in order to be able to overcome some sort of problem. And there might be times where you're facing a different problem where something more liberal might be the more proper response. But when you've permanently wed yourselves to one or the other, it kind of creates this lopsided kind of herky-jerky thing going on with how our civilization runs. And I'm getting tired of the seesaw effect. I'm tired of the pendulum swing that I've been through my entire life. Of just constantly just going back and forth between 2 radically different lurching ends. That's how you get fucking whiplash as a society. And lo and behold, there's not going to be much on here about it. There has apparently been some riots in Austin. Unfortunately, I've been at work the last couple of days, so I haven't witnessed any of this myself. From my end of the city, it like life's normal. You know, I go to work, I look out in the parking lot, and there's a bunch of people at a bar, and there's a bunch of people at Olive Garden, and cars are going around, and people having a good time and all dressed up. And like, it's like there's multiple realities going on at the same time. There's hardly a majority of the population that's out there rioting, let's say. So like, don't allow yourselves, I guess, to get too intimidated into thinking that there's this oncoming wave of humanity. Not that there isn't a wave of humanity out there, but it's not as bad as our minds let us picture in the dark hours of the night when we're sitting up looking at the internet worrying about this shit. See, Eric's son Weinstein is writing out a long quote from The Cat in the Hat in response to something from the New York Times. Oh, yeah, Trump having his people clear out the protesters, the tear gas, so he can go to that church. Duh. Like, what the hell is he supposed to do? How do I want to like string this all together? I guess there's a point where if a population is never allowed to feel like they're going to get any sort of justice or resolution to any of their issues, that time and time again attempts to voting in new politicians, changing parties, electing new sheriffs, whatever, time and time again, doesn't seem to alter the trajectory of any given individual event. They still know that they're going to end up facing the same outcome. You get to a point where the only response you have left is to riot and the violent insurrection. But on the other hand, we don't want to be living in the Mad Max free-for-all that could ensue. The cynical people out there in the crowds, the Antifa types, the people who are trying to take advantage of this and use this as cover to push their own schemes, they're not conscious of what the revolution would hand them the next day. If they tear the system down, who's going to take out the trash? Who's going to keep the water on? Who's going to keep the power on? Who's going to keep the internet on? Who's going to keep running all these fucking stupid phones that everyone's got to have? Especially a lot of the people of the age group who all think they want the revolution. They're all like, we're a whole generation that's been duped by our media. We've all been raised on cartoons and Muppets, conditioned to believe certain things are true by the media. Ultimately, that's why it was ironic when CNN got attacked the other day. It's like this is ultimately all put at their own doorstep for having created this narrative of life that we all think is true. And whereas there are factual things about the media narrative of life, it's not the truth of life. It's a highly curated and selective distortion of what real life is like and what people are like. And we're living in the results of a couple decades of that being a thing now. So congratulations. Hopefully this will end in such a way where certain parties will have a chance to realize their mistake. I don't know. We're kind of in a position where, like, if we don't want an anarchist free-for-all, then I guess we kind of are forced to end up having to want Trump to turn us into a goddamn military police state, which for years I've been arguing with people who say America's a police state. America's a police state. I'm like, no, we're not. We have all the equipment to be one, but we haven't actually crossed the threshold into being a police state yet. But now that we have people shooting rioters and we have National Guard people shooting rioters, it's that we're getting closer and closer, if we haven't technically already crossed the line. All these events have really shown, like, the police, we do not have a big enough police force to actually contain the entire population if it's an uproar all at once. And I'm really unsure if we have a big enough military to contain the entire country if the entire country was uprising all at the same time. And so because of that, authority has to reassert itself, and it has to reassert itself harshly. And as old Robert Heinlein, as many of us internet junkies, YouTube junkies know over the last couple years, from all the Starship Troopers stuff going around, it's true. Authority, the ultimate source of the power of authority, is its exclusive right to violence. And so there's going to come a moment where there's going to be a big crowd of people, and soldiers are not just going to be shooting one guy in kind of like in a loose single one-on-one encounter, but someone's going to be told over their radio to open up machine gun fire on a crowd of people at some point. And so at that point, as a population, do we all sit back and just let that happen? And we'll make some noise about how terrible it is on the internet, but we'll go back to our lives otherwise, because we don't want to get shot by machine guns by our own military. Or do we try to call their bluff and just overwhelm them? See, we don't need guns. All these years of the conservative libertarian thing about how we have to have guns to be able to fight the government, bullshit. throughout the past, anytime you show a gun to the fucking government, you get your ass shot by the government. But I mean, city upon city has been causing police forces to either bend the knee or literally, or to flee literally. And they're just using, for all intents and purposes, just rocks and sticks and fists. Maybe occasional firecracker here and there. That ain't shit. That ain't shit compared to the kind of stuff they can shoot at us before they even get into their lethal fucking weapons. I don't know. Sorry, give me a second. I'm scrolling through the Twitter here. Something I twittered earlier. I'm sure it's, and I guess it is a serious question of some sorts. I'm sure it's happened for some people, but I have a hard time thinking of any occasion where someone made a major decision out of anger that they didn't regret later. Apparently, Elon Musk is off Twitter for a while. Ice-T signed out tonight with a picture, apparently, of some police pointing gun at a dude who's got his kid on his fucking shoulders, which is pretty chill. I mean, I'm not against the riots. I'm not necessarily for the riots. I am against civilization ripping itself to smithereens. And I'm of the opinion that in the long term, the shutdown over COVID is the biggest mistake this country has ever made. Period. End of sentence. This would none of this shit would be happening if the shutdown hadn't happened. Hell, just the butterfly effect of how this little tiny minor decisions to the day would have progressed over the course of the last couple of months. George Floyd would probably not be dead right now if the shutdown hadn't happened. You can't say for sure, but he would have had a completely different last couple of months, different events leading him to different places at different times. He might never have intersected that fucking cop at that fucking time for that fucking reason. And we wouldn't have all these unemployed people. We wouldn't have all these politically agitated people taking advantage of outrage in another group. The outrage in the other group, I know there's a lot of gray zone about the ingenuousness of black rage, but there's also a lot of question mark about the genuineness of the counter to that. Let's say, Now, the Associated Press says Joe Biden is vowing to address institutional racism his first 100 days in office. Well, if you want to, address institutional racism as a Democrat, maybe address the fact that your party is the institution that was in charge of the fucking Confederacy during the Civil War. One thing that's bothered me, one of the things that caused me to start pulling away from the left several years ago, is there's kind of just something missed in the midst of all that fervor there was over tearing down Civil War statues, and anything that was marked by the South has to come down, except the Democrat Party. Convenient. Awful convenient. More virtue signaling from a Dungeons and Dragons page. Nah, why even bother reading that? Ice-T. I've been a long-time fan of Ice-T. It's weird how suddenly relevant Ice-T has become again. But I've been a long-time fan, like since about the age of 10 or 11 when OG Original Gangster came out. And then, to this day, I listen to Body Count on a actually fairly, regular basis. I consider them like one of my top, maybe not top 10 bands, but easily a top 20. Brett Weinstein. The anarchists are believers in a dangerous fiction. If we tear down civilization, what replaces it will be better. Yeah, I was kind of talking about that. That is part of what we are seeing. They are mad enough to think they are building something wonderful, even as they destroy the thing upon which we all depend. Yeah, no, see, the Phoenix isn't real. The idea that, we're going to burn the world down and we'll rebuild it something better. No, the world would be ashes and then everyone's going to fucking starve to death. And then maybe 2 generations after that, there might be a little rebuilding. You do not underestimate this planet cannot survive. Well, the human population cannot survive without the infrastructure that we've built up. And that infrastructure does not run without fucking money. Unless you're just going to enslave everyone and force them to have to fucking work in order to keep the system going. Is that going to be the great equity of the revolution? Everyone's got to fucking be forced to work for free. That's slavery. Let's see, how long is this going? Okay, we managed to get 25 minutes. My internet still is up and running. Amazing. Huh. Coleman Hughes, if you oppose the riots, you don't care about George Floyd, is the liberal version of you. If you oppose the Iraq War, you don't care about 9/11. The tragedy and the proper response to the tragedy are different issues. Yeah, that's pretty much, I'd agree with that. That's fairly accurate. Whereas I've been enjoying Ice-T, LL Cool J seems a little just like unhingy. Twitter is so fun. So much fucking fun. So glad I got back on it. Soledad O'Brien. Welp, if you're wondering why some people are frustrated and protesting, what is this video? What the fuck were these guys doing that got all these cops and National Guard on them, though? This video is missing stuff. I know, riveting television, right? D&D will not be presenting our own live stream broadcasting this week. Is that why John Campea and Robert Meyer Burnett have not been streaming? Is this some sort of thing? Or if you're streaming, then you're not on the side of the riots? Are they afraid of being targeted? Like, is it really worth being part of a faction that you have to constantly bow and scrape to? Some of my grandpa said he was a Air Force liaison to the CIA back in Saigon at the end of the Vietnam War. And his experience of Washington, D.C. can be summed up as basically saying all the Republicans are fags and all the Democrats are pederasts. And the old line of Republicans are dumb and Democrats are evil, I think is still a pretty accurate way of describing the whole thing. That's a good quote from Gene Roddenberry. Until humans learn to tolerate, no, that is not enough. To positively value each other. Until we can value the diversity here on Earth, then we don't deserve to go into outer space and encounter the infinite diversity out there. Hell, I'll retweet that shit. Boom. Oh shit, coronavirus. It's coming. It's going to be so funny when like so many protesters and rioters come down with coronavirus after this. Like the last 2 months goes completely just fucking wasted. Totally wasted time. All that shit like we went through, all the jobs we lost, all that bullshit, all the staying at home, all the money that had to be spent to bail out the unemployment system and to bail out the big banks and to bail out all these large corporations. All of that, a gigantic waste of time because all that effort to flatten the curve threw chucked right the fuck out the window with all this shit. So As I say, the shutdown is the biggest mistake in American history. The biggest, bigger than any of the atrocities that we committed in the past. I don't think really pale in comparison to this, because none of them led to an event that is this close to unraveling the entire pie. If we have to bring too much of our fucking military back from overseas, that's going to start World War III. I mean, people are kind of not conscious of just how much all of our military hardware sitting out there in the oceans and on other continents is keeping countries that would otherwise just fucking fuck the shit out of each other from doing that because they're scared of us. You know, and like, we don't think of ourselves as a cohesive whole. I mean, we've been so divided because of our political structure. You know, both of our political parties are basically like these vampire corporations that only exist to sell access to politicians, to people who donate to the party. There's nothing in the Constitution or the framework of this country that says we need to have parties at all. Hell, with Twitter and social media, it should be real easy for people to run for president without having to have a party apparatus around them. It's all bullshit. It's the main point of corruption for the whole goddamn system. It's the parties themselves. But I don't know how we'd ever go about abolishing them, because the very people that we would need to write legislation to abolish the parties are members of those fucking parties. Our police have been out of hand for too long, for like a century plus. Longer than that, possibly. At least going back to Prohibition, though. But how are the police supposed to de-escalate if we can't guarantee that the criminal underbelly of this country, and this country has a vast, unacknowledged criminal underbelly, if they don't disarm, then there's a lot of, you know, tactical motivation for the police to continue to stay as armed as they are. But we don't need them to be this fucking armed now, do we? What I'd like to see happen is, I think we should fire all of the police chiefs. All of them. Across the board, every fucking city. Just fire all our police chiefs, and then hire police chiefs from European and East Asian cities and other parts of the world who run their police forces in a more humane fashion, let us say. Because the truth is this isn't a black thing. The police are like, they're over the top. You know, I'm a fairly tall, kind of intimidating guy if you see me in real life. And every time I've had any kind of interaction with a cop, even as like, I'm not drunk, I'm not doing anything violent, just being as passive as possible, always at least one of them will have their fucking hand on the hilt of their gun on their fucking waist and shit. That's why I can at least relate to some of the black experience of the constant harassment and shit. I might not have the exact same experience, but I have just enough of it that I can extrapolate even more from that. So I don't blame a lot of these people for feeling the way they do. I don't like it. Something I said to Ice-T. It's like, I don't, you know, I might not agree 100% with everything being expressed by the motherfucker, but he's got every right to feel the way he feels. And it's totally justified that he feels the way he feels. And it's totally justified that he feels the way he feels. Here we go. Is it still on? Told me my connection was unstable there for a second. Half hour in. Still not bad. Better than the fucking 5 minutes I made last time. Trying to live stream. It says I have one viewer. Who knows if that's even true. In the remote list. Let's see. Over here on my other screen, I'll refresh and see what it says. If anyone is watching, feel free to drop something in the chat. You know, part of a problem I've always had with making fucking videos is that it's awkward just talking to myself. I've always felt discouraged from doing that because it's a sign that, you know, you're an actual nut job and not just a guy who plays a nut job on TV, so to say. So I would hope to be able to have some sort of bit more of direct interaction, so I'm not just constantly having to freeball everything or resort to looking at Twitter. But seeing that no one's commenting, I'll just go back to Twitter. Tim Pool. Oh, that's the same fucking post again. Oh, yay. Mythic Odysseys of Theros has launched digitally. This is a terrible fucking time to be releasing a new fucking game setting here, Dungeons and Dragons. Blackout Tuesday is a thing tomorrow on our social media pages. Oh, God. Yeah. I'm not at all impressed seeing a subsidiary of Hasbro making signs that they care about the people. They're a fucking publisher. They're just out to sell books. They don't care. It's Star Wars, when they had, their public posts about, their stand with the people and all that shit. Like, bullshit, you stand with fucking black people. Were you standing with black people when you let the Chinese marketers shrink John Boyega's image down to microscopic size on the poster for Force Awakens? Was that you standing up for black people then? You're a fucking multi-million-dollar company. I have absolutely, no belief that Lucasfilm gives a shit about anyone for real. They're just out for their own bottom dollar. And all this is just a way to try to court an audience that doesn't even like to watch this shit. Let's see. Greta Van Susteren. People who hate real Donald Trump will criticize his walk to St. John's. People who love real Donald Trump will be in awe of it. We live in very divided times. Okay, well, I'm not really critical of it, but I wouldn't say I'm in awe of it either. It's not awe-inspiring. The fuck is that? Don't give a shit about Geraldo Rivera. Richard Grinnell. Yeah, okay. Well, congratulations, because this Blackout Tuesday, if it's already in effect, I'm seeing a massive drop-off in tweets from any of the liberal sources I look at. I'm basically just seeing the conservatives I follow. Well, congratulations, folks. Well, anyway, I guess this was a successful test. What were we up to? Almost 40 minutes of me babbling. Still nothing. What's the point of building an audience if no one's willing to talk? Just got this in the mail. The Spelljammer hardcover from DriveThruRPG. Great time to have gotten a nice big thick new role-playing game book. Everyone's definitely in the mood for gaming tabletop right now. But it'd be fun to read through it and adapt it for 5th edition if possible. I might make some videos on that at some point in the future. Still not a damn thing in the chat. Literally, the last thing I tweeted on my timeline is the last thing that even appears on my timeline. That's sad. We used to be so much more of a night type of fucking society. No one parties anymore late. America's just really gotten lame. And I guess this is lame. All right, so hit like, subscribe, all that bullshit. Talk to you at some other time. Yeah, end.